Hey everybody, John here. This video I'll be talking to you about the surgery that was the most significant with me being in a wheelchair and everything. Basically, they lengthened my hamstrings, which the hamstrings are the muscles in the back of your legs that go from the top of your back of your legs to the below the knee or whatever. I don't know the technical terms of things, so bear with me a little bit. So what they did was, here's your hamstring, which is your muscle. They cut it down the middle, partially, like, so they came in and cut it down the middle and then went out to the other side. So right here is where they came out, and then they took it and they slid it down and they attached it right here. So they lengthened it but also weakened it at the same time. They did that with both of my legs, and they also did my hips as well. They lengthened my hip muscles because that was another issue I was having. It was my hips were tightening up on me and my hamstrings were tightening up. They tightened up, a lot. I couldn't tell you why, because the way it was the disability caused something to go wrong in my muscles to cause it. They don't know why, they don't know how. Well, they know how is the spine. The spine messed up, and that's what caused everything else to go wrong. With my disability being spina bifida. So they did this surgery. The doctor was like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be great. You're gonna be walking within 6 months. 4 to 6 months," he said. And you'd be like, "Yeah, I've done this before, and it's worked, and it's been successful, and everything's gonna go good, and everything's gonna be okay." I'm like, "Okay, awesome. I usually can trust doctors. Most people usually could." And so we went with the surgery and did it, and everything went smoothly. I woke up from anesthesia, and I had big braces on my legs, like the big white things that you get if you break your leg or whatever, or break your leg or break your arm or whatever. And I remember it was it was a bearable pain. I could, deal with it. It wasn't that big of a deal. So within three weeks, I was out of the hospital, and I was in a rehab center. So I was still in part of the hospital, but it was the rehab part of it where they did physical therapy and made sure everything was still going good and everything. That was the painful part. Sitting on my stomach while my physical therapist put weight on my ankles, forcing my legs to go straighter. And this was 3 weeks after surgery. So you're pulling on a muscle that just got cut and lengthened and stapled or stitched or whatever together. And whew, it hurt really bad. I had a Russian physical therapist. He was really ruthless. I'm not saying all Russians are, but he was, he was definitely, "Oh, stop complaining." So I managed to get along with him after a couple of weeks. So I did that for a couple of months actually. I was there for 2 months. I was in rehab for 2 months. That's how crazy it was. So after that, I still did outpatient therapy. So after the 2 months, I still went back there every week to do therapy and everything. And so he, did his best, and everything was going okay at the time. And then I got to about 85% better. My legs could get, almost straight, but not straight enough to lock my knees. And so and this whole time, from getting out of the hospital and everything, I had these long braces that went to my hips down to my feet. So I had full braces. They had hinges at the knees so I could bend my knees, but then I could also lock the braces straight. so that my legs were straight. Well, not fully straight, but as straight as they would go. So I was walking with those, and I was walking with the Canadian crutches that had the thing around my arm, then the big bar and the handle. And so I was walking with Canadian crutches and those braces on, and I was walking for maybe 50% of the day on those, and it was good. I liked it. It was improvement, but I didn't get any farther than that. 6 months go by, and I go to see my doctor to say, hey, what's up? I'm not getting, any improvement. And I mean, intense therapy. I mean, I did that for months and months. And so I go to see my doctor, and the nurse says, well, he's not here anymore. So I was like, what? He went up to Boston Medical. He switched hospitals, and he went to another state. And, because he got more money there. So, he was thinking about money, and which that's okay, but I just was a little pissed off because he just leaves me like that, like no notice, nothing. And so he was the only specialist and the only one at that hospital that has done that surgery. So none of the other doctors knew what to say, or they couldn't comment on what, anything. So, and I wasn't going to go all the way to Boston just to get, see him. Well, at the time. And then a year and a half goes by. Still, I'm actually getting worse at that time. I was getting worse after 6 months. My legs kept getting tight. They got tighter again. So I was like, what the hell? I got into depression again because it was getting worse, and I just gave up and I stopped going to physical therapy. And then finally, I'm like, well, I'm going to Boston. So instead of going to Boston to see that doctor, I went to Boston to go see another doctor, a different doctor, to get a second opinion. He basically sat there. The appointment was 5 minutes. He sat there and said, well, most people with spina bifida do never walk again. Once they get to your stage, they are in a wheelchair, the rest of their life. And I didn't like that, so I went out of I left there crying. I was sad, and I was like, well, I don't want to believe him. And I ended up believing him for a while, got into depression, went to therapy to talk to somebody, and it got real worse. Really mentally messed me up. So that's that surgery, and it's still getting worse till this day. But I don't want to ruin the final chapters, but yeah, it's basically gotten worse. Worse. No one had answers for me. No one told me, well, they had answers, but their answers wasn't good enough for me. I didn't like their answers. So the challenges, for one, were, for example, I was at school, and at school you have to have an elevator pass. My school is 5 floors tall, one building, 4 floors in the other building, and you have to have an elevator pass, and you can only bring one person with you when you go on the elevator. Well, when we're coming back for lunch, going back to class from lunch, it's like, well, now I have to either bring one person with me and separate from the big group of 7 people, or, be by myself. Most of the time I was by myself. So what happened would be I'd miss, a lot of the conversation. I felt, like I was not even part of that group anymore when we met up in the hallway, and it just sucked. I hated it. So, what usually happened, I wouldn't go back to the group. I'd just go to class because I already missed some of the conversation, and they've, all mostly gone back to class anyway. So it's one of those emotional things. I mean, it doesn't hurt too much to be, in that situation. Physically, it doesn't hurt me, but it's just like, to split up from your friends, and you miss things, and it just sucks. And, some places don't even have elevators. So it's like, well, if a restaurant doesn't have stairs, well, I guess I'm not going to that restaurant. I'm not going to be able to eat there, and it sucks. And so my next chapter will be the challenges of being in a wheelchair. Hope you liked it. Rate, comment, subscribe. Peace out.